Good morning, Nancy and Mary. Welcome back to our Cover Your Assets podcast. And the topic for discussion today is when data becomes a trade secret. So just real quick, for those that don't know us all, Nancy Cronin is with ipCapital Group and focuses on IP strategies for companies. And Mary Guzman is founder of Crown Jewel Insurance. And Nancy, I'm going to start off with you with this umbrella topic called basically data and trade secrets. For us, or for the markets or people who think about the compilation of data, maybe we think about proprietary data, the logical grouping of which creates something like a recipe, creates something like code for a piece of software, create something like a database, a proprietary database that AI might use. So when we think about proprietary data in the context of trade secrets, we really just think about logical groupings that end up with a category. So can you talk just for a minute about what type of data, although it's a broad category, what type of data do you see in the market as qualifying as a trade secret?
Sure. Thanks, Kate. Well, trade secrets that are not as mysterious as people might think. There's a couple bodies of law that define them: the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, the Defend Trade Secrets Act, and there's some differences, but they agree on two fundamental things. The trade secret is information that derives value from being secret, and that you've done something to protect that secret. Very commonly, people think of lab notebooks, they think of, like you said, recipes for things, but that extends well beyond, those kind of traditional forms, especially now in the advent of digital and data, AI, machine learning. All of the information that we derive from doing our business, if it gives you unique value, it's a trade secret. Pretty much any information that gives you a unique competitive advantage that, if leaked or lost or publicized, would harm you because you've invested in your company and you've developed these unique learnings and pieces of knowledge. That's a trade secret, and I think that is not well known, to companies that are handling this data.
Right. And Mary, when Nancy thinks about unique things relevant to the company, we also think about things more commonly that we hear about in risk management, like PII, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the cyber world, which is where I grew up, we talk and focus on PII, PHI, other things that are kind of regulated because they're personally identifiable information or personal health information, things where there's a regulatory requirement to notify people if that information is compromised during a breach. So I think when risk managers and other people that are taking a view of this risk think about trade secrets, they automatically eliminate PII, PHI, and other types of data, which in and of itself is not a trade secret. It's what you do with that information. So if you're training on or making strategic decisions on or developing rating models or deciding which patients you're going to see and who's going to qualify for a clinical trial and all kinds of other information on the basis of having that unique information or that information that might be available to other people, but what you're doing with that information creates a unique opportunity for you and drives a competitive advantage for your organization, such as that rating model, that algorithm, that generative AI output that can be created only by your organization because only you had the correct data to put in it. Yeah. Again, it needs to be a closed model. We'll talk a little bit more about AI in a moment, but just about any kind of data that allows you to make decisions and to create a competitive advantage for your company, to Nancy's point, can be a trade secret.
It's almost what resonates for me is the recent JPMC suit with regards to the credit card data that was taken. Nancy, why is this so relevant today? Why why are we talking about data and when they become trade secrets today? Data's been around for a while. We've been accumulating it for a very long time. Why is this so relevant today?
Yeah, so yes, data's existed, for as long as companies have existed. And it may be that in the past, you might have had just a list, customer list, or, a tech roadmap or something that you drew together with your team. Now that everything's gone heavily digital, and further that the computing power is so amazing that you can do more and more things with your data, value accumulates in these databases and how you use them. So perhaps 10 years ago, that wasn't the case, but we are on a massive, hockey stick curve, if I can use a trite term, on how data is just driving the value of companies now. So it was always important. Now I think it's just elevated to a new level. And because we're using this data to create companies in and of themselves, some companies are just AI and machine learning data companies. So all their value sits in their information and how they use it.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary, the market that you've estimated when you started thinking about putting Crown Jewel together and putting a really smartly created product that covers trade secrets into the market, you were looking at something like 35 trillion in the United States for uninsured trade secret assets. What do you think? What is your perspective? Sort of why now? Why are insurance companies rising? Why are these policies rising? Why are we calling out trade secrets from, say, cyber?
So great question. And yeah, the numbers are staggering. It almost seems silly if you throw out a number like $35 trillion worth of assets are not insured in this country. That's 5 times the value of patents, which I think is a shocking number to most people. But if you think about it, the reason why this is so critical is that virtually everything in a company's R&D pipeline that has legs to it, that they've spent a lot of time and energy developing, so we'll call them later stage R&D pipeline items, will automatically be trade secrets as long as you're putting proper protections around them, because you uniquely generated that, whatever it is, the thing that's being developed in R&D, and it provides value to your organization, or else you wouldn't be spending all that time and energy developing it. Outside of that, you have data that forms opinions and creates know-how all over the rest of your organization, which is not typically true with patents. And so when you think about logistics and supply chain functions and how you negotiate and deal with your customers and all of the things that create your ability to reach certain groups within your customer base, because you know what their buying behaviors are. All of those decisions and competitive advantages are built on data that you've analyzed and gathered from some place. Cyber policies do not cover the value of that data. They don't cover the value of intellectual property assets, period. So when you think about what's covered under a cyber policy, if that information is compromised during a breach, which we can get into a long detail about what that means, but essentially, cyber policies cover your cost to respond to that regulatory response we were talking about earlier, where you have to notify individuals whose information may have been compromised. But in terms of all the time, energy, and money you've spent using that data to do something to your advantage, or that it will create further advantage for you in the future, is never covered under a cyber policy. In fact, nor is it covered under any other insurance policy in the world. So we took a look at this and said, if 90% of the value of the S&P 500 is now estimated to be in intangible assets, and 5 times the value of patents within that is in trade secrets, we as an industry have an obligation to figure out how to cover it. It's just crazy that it's not covered. So that was kind of the position that we took, is these are assets. They're not just sunk expenses in R&D. If they're protected properly, that sunk expense turns into an asset.
So that's like again, and I know we'll have another podcast on this, but when you think about sort of listing these type of assets, you think about Rippling, their go-to-market strategy, their customer list, their pricing, right? Data that just manifests itself as go-to-market strategy, pricing, etc. So,
Yes.
what, in sort of wrapping up, what would you recommend, Nancy? How are you all in the IP strategy area, IP strategy, monetization, valuation, how are you recommending people start to protect? And it may start with identification.
Absolutely. So we have always been proponents of a holistic IP strategy, and that means we're not just patent centric. We've never been just patent centric. Yes, patents can be important for the right types of innovations and invention. However, as we've just stated, there's a ridiculous amount of value that lies outside of patents in the knowledge that it is either unpatentable or for various other reasons is just not the right choice. So we help our clients put together, a combination of these types of mechanisms for protection. And, it depends on the type of company you are. If you're very data centric, clearly there will be more opportunities around maybe a software patent, but yes, lots and lots of trade secrets. To do that, you need to have the right workflows, the right programs, the right protections in place, and trade secrets to be defendable need to be cataloged. There needs to be a policy. There need to be procedures around how you handle it and communication with your employees and putting them on notice of what's a trade secret and what's not and what they're supposed to do with it. Now, absent of that, if you get to court on this, it's really hard to defend that you even knew you had a trade secret or that your employees knew what to do about that or what not to do with it. So it really is all about getting the foundation in place of a good IP strategy program and implementing it in a way that then down the road, if you need to defend yourself, you've got something to stand on.
It's interesting, Nancy, because, we almost look at trade secrets after they're dead and stolen versus thinking about them during their life and figuring out how we could leverage them, right? Mary, you'd probably look at how can we leverage them during their life, right? So we think about securing and insuring. What would you recommend for leapfrogging from what Nancy's saying? You put in reasonable measures. Without them, you're waiting until after they're dead to basically utilize them. What's the recommendation when it comes to sort of secure and insure?
Well, so we're big proponents, as Nancy is, of identifying the it up front. So many companies don't do that. They just assume that all their confidential information is either just confidential information and it's not a trade secret, or conversely, that everything that's confidential information is a trade secret, and neither one of those is true. You have to identify using the litmus test that we talked about earlier, whether or not a particular thing that gives you a competitive advantage is in fact your trade secret. And if so, pull it out of the realm of everybody can access this thing. We can talk about it on our Slack channel. I'm going to use Rippling as an example because it's so poignant here. Yes, deal looks like shady individuals were involved in planting somebody inside Rippling's organization, and that needs to be dealt with criminally, I believe. But aside from that, if I were Rippling and I were advising them before all of this went down, I would have suggested that they do some things very differently based on what we know from the case filing itself, which is it doesn't appear that they had a specific register of individual trade secret assets. They just kind of said all of our sales information and all of our competitor information is a trade secret. And this person, this bad, nefarious insider, was using our Slack channel to access 25 times a day all of this information about sales and marketing, and he had no business doing that because he's in HR. He kind of shot himself in the foot, or they shot themselves in the foot by using that argument, in my opinion, because he should not have had access to that information. If it's a trade secret, not everyone in the company should have access. Number
Yeah.
two, he should know it's a trade secret. And number three, it should have certain additional protections around it. So when we talk about this, we talk about identify, put a value on it so that relative to the other things in your organization, even if you just used how much money you've spent to develop something so far, now you know which assets need the most attention first. So identify value, then mitigate, develop your mitigation strategy around the most valuable ones first, then insure the value of those trade secrets using our product, Crown Jewel Insurance Innovation Guard. And then all of those things together will give you the protection that you need to actually increase the valuation of your company for exit and potentially leverage for financing and lending. And the reason for that is now you've uncovered and valued and are insuring against the only hazard peril, the most valuable competitive advantage of your company, but yesterday you were not doing. So now you can go to these third parties and say, we have $35 million worth of trade secrets right here, and they're insured for that amount against theft.
So thank you, Nancy. Appreciate you jumping on our podcast today, and we'll give a plug for the work that ipCapital Group is doing to help companies identify, monetize, right, during the asset's life, and then Crown Jewel covering so that we can preserve and basically optimize these trade secrets that are all based on data. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.